Over the past year, I've studied the routines of people like Brian Johnson, Tim Ferriss, and Andrew Huberman to figure out how they develop such high levels of focus and productivity. And through that, I've discovered 7 secret habits that these highly effective biohackers all do, and I've distilled them into this video. The first secret is known as the Quantified Self. This is a relatively new movement in the biohacking space, but this just means that they try to measure as many data points about themselves as they can. But it can also extend to things like how you're spending your time or how many hours you've worked in a day. The point of this is that you have a baseline that you try and work off of. Personally, I see biohacking as almost the next step of self-improvement because you can actually see and quantify how much you're improving. There's this interview I listened to with this investing legend named Ed Thorpe. This guy is almost in his 90s, but he looks incredibly young, and the interviewer, Tim Ferriss, asked him how he was able to maintain his weight and stay healthy. And he said it came down to a simple task of writing down his weight every single morning when he woke up. Even though technically it's a lagging indicator, just that simple act of writing down his weight made him more conscious about what he was putting into his body. Before I started wearing a fitness tracker or a sleep tracker, it was always really opaque how I could actually improve in those areas. And although it is annoying to wear some of these, I can now really easily quantify myself and see how I'm improving on my sleep and how I'm improving my workouts. The Whoop tracker is especially in-depth because it can actually give you correlations of how certain activities affect your workout or your sleep. Before I bought a sleep tracker, I just wrote down literally in a journal when I went to bed and when I woke up, and even that can make a big difference. The second habit is sleep hacking. The more that I've gone down the path of trying to optimize my sleep for more focus, productivity, and athletic performance, the more I realize that optimizing your sleep basically entails optimizing your entire day. Like how much caffeine you drink in the morning or how much natural sun you got. These are all important factors that will affect the time that you sleep and also how deep of a sleep you will get. I don't think that there is a one-size-fits-all sleep optimization approach, but the biggest things that I found to improve my sleep are to use blackout curtains, get sunlight in the morning, optimize your caffeine usage, eat dinner early, and avoid blue light. Another thing that also helped me out with sleep hacking was to figure out my sleep chronotype. Most of the population can actually be categorized into these 4 main buckets, and of course there are outliers, but depending on which chronotype you fall into, your optimal sleep time, work time, and exercise time could be different. You can just take a 5-minute quiz to figure out what your sleep chronotype is. So if you want to try that out, I'll leave a link in the description. But I now have systems that make it easier for me to optimize my sleep. Like, for example, my lights turn red when it's nighttime to remove blue light, and I also get locked out of my devices so I can't continue using them. I'm gonna make a video where I talk about how I optimize my computer, so if you want to see that, make sure to subscribe. But the third principle is diet optimization. With diet optimization, there are basically 2 main areas, and that's meal timing and meal planning. With meal timing, the main idea is that you want to try to reduce glucose spikes, because having frequent glucose spikes, which can be caused by having a bunch of snacks or sugar, can cause a inability to focus and a bunch of other health problems. And one of the best ways to reduce glucose spikes is intermittent fasting. When you fast, your glucose levels are pretty steady, and so that's optimal for focus and longevity. I know a lot of people that follow intermittent fasting, they tend to skip breakfast, but personally the way I've done it is I have breakfast, but then I just have a early dinner. And that's because I find that going to bed in a fasted state to be the most optimal for my sleep. But the second part of diet optimization is meal planning. If you're just randomly picking where you're going to eat for lunch and dinner every single day, number 1, that's going to be very cognitively taxing. And number 2, you're probably not going to make the right health decisions because you'll most likely just optimize for taste or convenience. With diet too, I don't really think that there's a one-size-fits-all approach, but it just depends on what you're currently optimizing for. The fourth habit is HRV training. HRV means heart rate variability, and the higher you can get this number, the better your body will be at stress management, athletic performance, sleep, and recovery. If you don't know what HRV is, you can kind of imagine your heart to be a drummer. If the drummer doesn't increase the speed or decrease the speed, then the variability is 0. If it suddenly goes from very fast to very slow, then that time in between the switches is known as heart rate variability. And so having a higher number is better because it means that your body can respond to different situations very quickly. The minimum effective dose from everything I've seen is to do around 120 minutes of low intensity cardio and 1 session of high intensity cardio every single week. I usually break this up into about 4 days and I do 45 minutes of running. I find that if I can get my heart rate above like 120, which is known as zone 2, I consistently feel really amazing afterwards. So there's also this cognitive benefit of doing this. It's really amazing how your heart rate can regulate and control how you feel and respond to different situations. The more you train this, the better your body will be to function in all aspects. The fifth habit is regular and deliberate cold exposure. A couple of years ago, a lot of YouTubers have made videos talking about doing cold showers and using that as a way to build more discipline. But recently, there's a lot more studies that show the cognitive and physical benefits from doing deliberate cold exposure, especially with ice baths, because it's a lot colder than doing a cold shower. The number one thing you'll feel is a instant increase in focus and energy. Studies have shown that you can get a 250% increase in dopamine for several hours hours afterwards, which is better than a lot of nootropics or drugs. I was watching this documentary, and Tony Robbins has this cold plunge installed in his home where it's just the height and width of his body. I looked for a similar setup that you can buy, and recently there are these options on the market where you can install an ice bath in your home, and it just continuously filters the water for the whole month, so you don't have to switch it out. But you could always just buy ice in the grocery store and fill it up in a tub. The sixth habit is meditation and breath work. Personally, I use this more as a tool to change my body state versus a daily habit. Recently, I've been reading this book called Breath that talks about the power of nasal breathing and how that affects your cognitive and physical performance. It goes into the science of how much our breath controls our health, and the author makes the argument that the way you breathe is just as fundamental as diet and exercise. Breathwork is basically doing these breathing patterns that immediately change the state of your autonomic nervous system. So if you're feeling bad or unable to focus, just doing one session that takes 5 minutes can completely change how you feel and get you back into that state of flow. There's also some breathwork patterns that can literally change your state of consciousness temporarily, but I wouldn't recommend doing that without a professional. It's just crazy to think that just the way you breathe can literally cause you to hallucinate. There's this one that I've been testing, and it's called box breathing. It's a technique used by Navy SEALs to stay calm in super stressful situations. It's basically breathing in a cyclical way, like you inhale for 4 seconds, you hold for 4 seconds, you exhale for 4 seconds, and then you hold for 4 seconds. And then you just repeat that over and over for like 5 minutes. This has been shown to calm you down and increase your concentration almost immediately. And I mean, if it's good enough for Navy SEALs in those situations, then it's probably good enough for me to just sit down and work in front of my computer. Even the most common form of meditation, where you're literally just paying attention to your breath, has been shown in scientific studies to actually increase the gray matter in your brain. So you can literally be expanding your cognitive ability with each daily session. Andrew Huberman talks about this quite a bit, and he says that the minimum effective dose is about 13 minutes of mindful meditation every single day. But the seventh habit of highly effective biohackers is self-experimentation. And this is arguably the most important habit of all, because every person will respond differently to the same habits. So the only way to know if it's going to work for you is if you try it out and you measure your own progress. But a couple of notes for people who are thinking about trying these biohacking habits is to always consider your health and safety first. Personally, I've seen a lot of biohackers take it to an extreme where they're doing these crazy experiments on their health. But for me, I test pretty conservatively, and I tend to have a pretty boring diet, and I minimize supplements and vitamins. Although these are probably the most effective habits to get started with biohacking and optimizing your health, there are a ton more. And so I'm making a video right now where I go through and rank every single biohacking habit that I can find. So if you want to see that, make sure to subscribe, but I'll see you in the next video. Peace.